And thanks everybody for being here, and especially I see faces that were with me last hour too, so thanks for coming back. This session I'm hoping to get through a ton, just because there is so much around this question of how to do this work. There's never time, there's no, etc. So this answers that, begins to answer that. So I'm really excited to dig into this today with you. Before we get started, just a little bit about TIES. TIES, T-I-E-S, is the T stands for Time in General Education. We are helping systems across the country at state, district, and school level to become closer to 80% or more of the day for all students. That I is instructional effectiveness, so that is a big focus of today, is that instructional effectiveness. We don't want just people in classes, we want them learning with materials that are geared just for them. And the E is engagement with general ed and their peers. And so that access and engagement within that general education curriculum together with their peers in their grade level. And then that S is the support at the state and district level to actually do this work. And so even in the first session, things that are identified of, this is a systems piece that we need to fix. And so TIES Center is actively working towards that end. You will hear me talk about a number of different resources today. I have a resource page that I will actually update if more things come out today, because our website is we've been very prolific. And we do hear that sometimes finding some of the good stuff that people would want is more difficult, so we want to be responsive to that. And anything that comes out of our conversation today that I think of, oh, you should have this, you really need to take a look at that, I will put that on our resource page for you. As Jeff said, I am Jennifer Summerness. I'm from the University of Minnesota, which is where the TIES Center is based. Prior to coming to TIES, and I'll just do a really quick about me, because the bio is in the is in the app. But my background was a special ed teacher, but my training was inclusive at the University of Wisconsin, which back in the 90s when I was doing that, it was pretty rare, right? But I was lucky enough to be with Lou Brown, where everything was inclusive, where over, under, around, or through, you figure it out. But even today, there aren't many programs that are providing an inclusive experience for practice or pre-service teachers, which, so it's kind of one of those things that I feel very lucky. I taught in a number of different places. My husband moved around with his job. And I kind of leaned into that, of doing every grade level that I could, all sorts of different disability categories as far as the students that I was teaching. And I would always pick a spot that wasn't inclusive yet and work on putting those systems in place for kids and kind of testing the theory of all means all. Does it really? Yeah, it really does, right? And so I was able to do that for a number of years and then returned back to the University of Minnesota, where I worked on my graduate work in educational administration so that I could understand those systems that need to be in place so that teachers can do this well. So that's a little bit about me. Today, I want to run you through a whole lot of stuff. So my objectives is to really help you with this how, and really, be able to think about some of the pieces that come up over and over and over again, one of which is time to do this. Another is how do you do standards-based instruction for kids who have the most extensive support needs. And so with that in mind, let's get started. So hopefully within your app you have the resources and things that I shared prior to coming here, but I also did a suspenders and a belt kind of protection for myself, which is to have the resources page as current as of last night that I think that I will be using today is here. And this is the resources page that I told you that I will add things. If things come up today, I will put it here so you can look here later. So keep track of that. See people still getting the QR. I can come back to if people need it. Oh, they're not. They were. Oh, they're back on now, hopefully. I wonder if it's, I wonder if it's the lavalier that doesn't pick it up. It picks it if I go there. Maybe it's not loud enough. Can you see it now? No, I think it's the lavalier maybe. Yeah.
The mic on the computer has to hear it.
Yep. Okay.
The mic on the computer needs to hear what you're saying.
Okay. So maybe I'll just come here. I'm good. I'm good right here. All right. I won't move. This is really hard for me, guys. This is asking a lot. Okay. I'll put my little lavalier thing down. Okay. Did everybody get this? Okay. Perfect. Before we start digging into things, I really want to have you guys think about together. We know that adults learn by processing experiences. We know that if we reflect on our own stuff, that then we can apply it to other people and places. So I want to take the time to take just a couple minutes. And because people are kind of spread out, it might be a little bit more difficult to do, but hopefully either in this process, two things could happen. One, you might end up closer to me or closer to each other, because there are other times that I'm going to have you talk. So let's get it out of the way right now with this think, pair, share. If you're not sitting next to someone, buddy up with someone, please, at least, because I will have you talking to elbow partners. So this is a good opportunity to do it. So take 2 minutes to think about this statement. If the adults are separate, the kids are separate. And then turn to your partner and share your thoughts about what that statement means to you. Anybody want to give me an idea of what you talked about? Thoughts?
We talked about if teachers' attitudes are like they're only here for a certain amount or they're not part of the class normally, then the kids are going to think, oh, they're not part of our class. So we try to set the example that they are part of our class, they're with us, they have a desk, they have a name tag, everything, it's all, and when they come, they're here, and when they're not, they're not. So, but they're still part of second grade and part of our class.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's so much around, like just having their name on a desk, a cubby, you know, they're on the roster, right? It's the first step, I think, if nothing else. But yeah, the adult piece too is a really interesting thing, right, to think about. What does it mean when people are separate in their roles? And it can look very much like that, and kids can feel it, you know? Thank you.
We talked about, like, a lot of our general ed teachers know differentiation needs to happen, but they feel like that should be the special education teacher's role. Like, I'll plan the core lesson, you plan the differentiation, and then I think that then in turn also leads into that separation with the students, because not always that kid with an IEP or whatever needs to be in that group today. Maybe they understood today's lesson, so that like co-planning and stuff really needs to happen between the teachers. So then it makes it easier so like all kids kind of get what they need as compared to these are your kids and these are my kids, even though they're all in the same classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. That responsiveness of, you know, what extra boost of instruction does a person need at any given time, and we're looking at everybody, not just the kids that are necessarily in that group. You know, you plan for them, right? Yeah, thank you. There's one more, way back there. How about, oh, here she comes. Otherwise, the other option is I can repeat your question if I can hear it so that it can go. But since you're in the very back, I won't make you yell.
So we talked about teamwork and how when you're separate, you're not going to be on the same page. And that goes into every aspect within the school, even like, so I'm in high school, so like when we're implementing things, the one teacher may not do it, but the other one does in their classroom, but then the kids are getting different messages as far as what the expectations are for the entire school. So just working as a team and being on the same page.
Yeah, thank you. And this is one of those things that we hear all the time. Like it came up in the last session. It's always like, but where's the time to do this? It's not only, a role thing, a sharing of roles and understanding the roles, it's a time thing. And that is why we're gonna go here today with this. So I want to get to both, and I wanna do both, how to find the time, and then when you have it, what are you gonna plan together, right? As far as instruction. So that number one barrier that we hear is time, as far as collaboration. And we heard it over and over and over in our work. And so we wanted to be responsive to that. And so we came up with this resource. It is linked in your thing. We worked with CAST to make sure that it was universally designed and with adults in mind, right? And so to really think about, not just, have conversations and say, well, you have to find the time. We know that only 5 minutes might be what you've got. You're crossing each other in the hallway. Like, how are you gonna make that work, right? I've been there. Like, you're lucky if you see each other in the hallway half the time, right? And when you think about the complexities of kids and the numbers of kids on caseloads, and especially in the higher grades when, you don't want kids to not be included in high school just because there isn't time for collaboration, right? So this is our answer to that. Whether you have 5 minutes, quick hallway discussion, if you have 15 minutes where you have maybe, a bite to eat, probably standing on the, on the playground together, but 15 minutes nonetheless, or that you actually have that coveted time of 45 minutes of planning. So we wanted to be very realistic with it. And so it's linking that available time to meaningful collaboration. And so I'm going to give you a chance to think about this together in a little bit. But just to outline, the 5-minute one, and we have whole teams of teachers that are just starting to, do this work in a meaningful or intentional way. And even just having the 5-minute protocol so that you can depend on that. You have the same language, you have the same types of ways of thinking about and breaking down those barriers to instruction and coming up with ideas. It's enough to get you through a lot of things. But really, it's looking at the content and thinking about the most essential pieces, and then thinking about instructional strategies together and activities together that can help address those barriers. The 15-minute then goes on to kind of stretch that a little bit as far as like how can you have that more inherent for all the kids in the class, right? Or that differentiation piece. And so again, like the person who said that, gen ed does the content, special ed does the differentiation, and those two worlds never shall meet, right? This tool will intentionally keep that from happening. So we're going to take a look at the 15-minute protocol. It just gives you just a little bit more time to collaborate with a colleague on it and break down those barriers. So thinking about solutions together for that whole class. So here's an example. What's the content of this lesson? So there's look-fors in there, there's supports to your thinking, and there are inclusive strategies that are universally designed as well that we're going to talk about. But it's really looking at the content of the lesson, even just having that quick conversation of what are you teaching? what are you teaching? And what's that most essential piece for all learners? Not just the kids with disabilities, but all learners. What are the biggest things, right? That's going to help you have mutual understanding of that lesson together, and it breaks down those walls within your roles as well. What are the instructional strategies and activities in this lesson, and what are the most helpful for teaching the essential content? Now, even just that piece alone, you think about within our roles of gen ed teacher, special ed teacher, this gets at that sharing of roles, right? You're able to think together about those essential pieces. You bring, as a special ed teacher, all of this understanding about how to differentiate or provide specially designed instruction for the students that you serve. Gen ed teachers know all of the content that you don't necessarily need to know if you're doing this the right way. You don't have to know all of the topics in high school or all of the subjects even in an elementary class as a special ed teacher. It's kind of crazy to expect us to, as special ed teachers to know all that stuff. So this helps you both bring your skills and related service providers to the table. So thinking through this 15-minute protocol, it has, you identify the barrier then, so what's the instruction, what's the content, the important piece, what is it, the most essential pieces, and then what is one barrier to that content that the students who have intellectual disabilities or extensive support needs might have. And then the 45-minute protocol expands it even more than that, to be thinking about just how do we universally design instruction from the start. So together as a team to remove that barrier together, or to come up with the ideas, and then have we considered how this new instructional strategy could benefit all students. Again, looking at the UDL lens, we want to be thinking in these ways. Is it a barrier to engagement? Is there a barrier in the ways that people are able to represent what they know, or action and expression, right? So we want to give new and different ways for kids to be thinking in these ways together. So I just want to touch on the UDL stuff because I'm pretty sure that people are familiar with UDL, but the 515-45 protocol really brings it in from the start. It's one of those pieces that it's not an afterthought. It is designed actually in a universally designed way, not only for the adults, but for the students as well. But the barrier being within the environment is a huge part before we even start thinking about this protocol and how to use it. It's not in the student, right? The students are a reason to be there. They're not the barrier. And in the first session, if you were there, one of the pieces that we talked about was the least dangerous assumption, which is to assume, without other information, that a person can do something. And it then becomes about the instruction, right? So if we assume a person can do what it is that we're asking them to learn and show what they know, that's where we start. And then we can just figure out what are those barriers to them actually learning and understanding it. And it seems kind of intuitive, right? But it's a switch in your mind of thinking through activities and instruction. So it really takes, it takes some practice. And to be able to do this within a team and in 5 minutes, right? So that's the key, is to stick to this piece of the protocol is a huge part. The barrier is in the instruction, it's not in the students. So even if you get those students who, have a laundry list of things that you're trying to figure out together, the instruction is the piece you got to figure out, right? So an example is a student can't read. Or they're how many, levels below grade level. That's putting it on the kid, right? Instead, if we think together around providing information in text-only format that is not accessible for everyone. So now what can we do as teachers? Right? How do we give access? How do we provide content consistently? How do we give people means to express what they know consistently? So then it's just putting in the accommodations and the means, right? And we'll go into this in more detail. The student can't keep up. We're going too fast. It's just not possible. Now, when I'm talking about it, and you probably all have students in your mind when I say these things, but when I'm talking about it, the kids that I'm talking about are the ones that truly, you'd think that you can't possibly mean that. I do mean that. That person who would have an asterisk by their name, perhaps, or in our mind of their needs are so significant that, I don't see it. And today I will give you an example of one of those kids that I wanted to intentionally provide for you because I do think that people have a hard time thinking about how this would look for kids who have the most extensive support needs, right? But pacing is one of them. So coming up with ideas around pacing or how to engage students. So if it's in the environment and not the student, the pace of the lesson doesn't allow everyone to process questions and respond. Seems pretty intuitive. But when you're thinking of the full range of needs within the class, that's going to look pretty different for some kids as far as what their needs are for that. So what are we going to do instructionally for that? Before we go, here's your turn, okay? The student can't write. How could we phrase that in the barriers in the environment or in the instruction? Any ideas? We could also go on to the next one. The student isn't self-directed. Ideas on either one of these. Yeah.
Provide sentence stems for them. I work with EL students, so a lot of them kindergarten, first and second graders. So they tell me what they are saying, and I write it for them in highlighter, and they trace over it too. Thank you.
You are in a room full of educators, I can tell, because you've already gone to the instructional strategy, right? And I love that. I love that. And this is just proving that thinking in this way. So a student can't write. The barrier in instruction might be students need
is to express themselves, and then that would go to the tracing, speech to text. So the environment is providing a different way to communicate.
Perfect.
Or express their answers.
See? Right? And that is like inclusive of the one that you're talking about, and how many others would benefit from different ways, right? Perfect. Anyone for the self-directed part? We probably have some kids in our minds that are not self-directed. How could we put that into the environment?
Task lists so they can check off as they do things, peer partners, having them repeat directions, chunking the material, frequent check-ins with the teacher.
Yep. And again, strategies, right? Because everybody wants to go, so absolutely, these are all ideas. We know them. Like, how do we, and do gen ed teachers know them as well as special ed teachers? And I should have asked that. Like, who here is a gen ed teacher? Special ed? Related service? Administrator? Consultant? Coach? University level? Anyone I've missed? Families? Oh my goodness. Counselors? Okay, thank you. Okay, so if we're putting it into the environment, then we can come up with all these things. Like if we understand that the environment is going to be different, it's going to be harder, even just this switch opens us up to possibilities, right? We have strategies within our 515-45 protocol that are based on the principles of UDL that match what we're talking about and offer a whole lot of instructional pieces. I'm going to give you some time to look at them versus me going through all of them because I think that's much more important. But you can see, we've got them, if you have someone that needs recruiting interest in the lesson, again, how many IEP goals have I seen of persisting? Or if there are goals around attention, right? So this is taking it again out of the kid, putting it into the environment and into the instruction. How are we going to do that? And how are we going to do it together, sharing our roles and expertise? Before we do that and look into the protocol some more, just to kind of think about what this can look like, because sometimes I think people need a visual as well, So in the classroom, thinking about this scenario. This is from a classroom in Maryland. We worked with the state of Maryland and Washington and Indiana when the TIES Center was the National Technical Assistance Center. And we have some great videos of these classrooms all on our website. There are, sometimes people just want to see all these different pieces. There's a bunch on there. But as we watch this one, think about, like, if you see the universal design, like, where is it? How about specially designed instruction? Are you seeing it there, right? Is there evidence of teacher collaboration? How would you know it? What would that look like? What evidence-based practices do you see? And what grade level standards? And are they for each and every person that you see in this video or that you could imagine are in this classroom, okay? This is a 6th grade classroom, and fingers crossed technology works.
A close-up of Newton's cradle. When one sphere at the end is lifted and released.
I should also say I'd put the audio description version on here, because not only is it captioned, but it also gives you some hints as to what's going on that you'll notice. So,
It strikes the stationary spheres, transmitting a force through the stationary spheres that pushes the last sphere upward. The last sphere swings back and strikes the nearly stationary spheres, repeating the effect in the opposite direction. Newton's Law, Inclusive 6th Grade Science with Jamie Keeley, General Education Science teacher.
For me, the most essential thing was thinking about the motion essential element, and that is for him to understand mass and height and how that affects motion.
A middle school science classroom, a student is working with a Newton's cradle.
So if I can isolate Newton's third law and use a hands-on manipulative such as a Newton's cradle, we can generate models where he can see if I drop one sphere at a certain height, only one sphere will move on the other side as an opposite reaction. But if I drop 2 spheres, then we can see 2. So as a direct result from his motion, he can see the result. So I can isolate at least one of those points, which is how height is involved with motion.
Ms. Keeley sitting next to AJ and his lab partner at a table. AJ is using a Newton's cradle as Ms. Keeley provides an explanation.
You don't want to throw it, you want to just let your fingers go. There you go.
Look how cool that is. See, so look.
AJ, a 6th grade student.
What's happening, science experiment girl?
So you're doing an experiment with a girl?
Yes.
And she's helping you?
Yeah, class.
Nice.
Ms. Keeley, standing at the front of the science classroom, speaking to her group of students.
Are you only able to bring one of the spheres up at a time? No. What could you do?
You could do 4.
You could do 4. Wouldn't be that exciting because it would just kind of be like this.
Ms. Keeley passing out Newton's cradles to the students in the class. She and Melissa DeTota, an EC support staff member, are demonstrating how to use the cradles with the students.
It is even the simplest little tangle can cause a big, big problem. Guys, do not touch these yet.
These are
Who
Newton's
is
cradles.
with me?
Ms. DeTota is kneeling next to AJ. She and Ms. Keeley are demonstrating Newton's cradle.
AJ, you want to make sure that these strings aren't like this. See how it's not tight? So when you pull it back in the middle, like this, keep it straight, and then just let it go. Let it go.
AJ pulls one of the metal spheres out and releases it. When the released sphere hits the group of stationary spheres, one sphere on the opposite end goes up.
How many came up over here? You see it? How many is coming up?
2, 1.
1. Good.
Good job.
Ms. Keeley walking around the room. She is stopping at different groups to discuss what they are seeing with their Newton cradle demonstrations.
If there's more energy in the system, the reaction is going to have more energy because they're going to be equal and opposite.
Ms. DeTota working with AJ and his lab partner. AJ pulls one of the metal spheres out and releases it. When the released sphere hits the group of stationary spheres, one sphere on the opposite end goes up.
You gotta make sure that's tight. There you go. Let it go. How many over here bounce up? One. So you used one ball, and one ball bounced up over here.
You can
Count these.
AJ counts the number of spheres in the Newton's cradle. His lab partner assists.
1, 2, 3, 4. How many is that? 4.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
So find your number 4.
AJ presses 4 into a program on his tablet.
There you go.
Good job. You crash your bike.
Ms. Datota is kneeling next to AJ. He is working on his laptop. He motions for her to step away, indicating he wants to do the work himself.
You don't want me to read it to you? How are you going? You go ahead. Let me see. Oh, man. Okay.
AJ smiles and does a small fist pump. His lab partner smiles in support.
Got it right? Yeah.
Okay. What did you see? What did you think? Any universal design for learning that you're seeing, or what?
Thank you. In terms of universal design for learning, just the idea of the manipulatives that they had the option to use those if they wanted to. You can also see that there were worksheets on the paper or on the tables as well. We just kind of had a couple questions. Evidence of teacher collaboration. So my question is, are those true co-teachers? When I think of co-teaching, I think of the idea that you shouldn't be able to determine which one is the special ed teacher and which one is the content teacher.
Yeah.
Is the woman that was working with AJ, I believe, is she with them every day? Was she just coming in for this video? So a lot of things that we thought about. I like that the content teacher then eventually did start moving around so that she wasn't just focusing on AJ. So it may have just been for this video, but yeah, so sorry. Oh, and then grade level standards for all, absolutely. They're all the Newton's laws. That's part of 6th grade standards, if I remember correctly. So they were all receiving that, which was awesome.
Thank you. Those are all really good questions, and it's a work in progress, right? Which that's the best part, and I love that you asked that. AJ does not have a one-on-one para. That was not the special ed teacher. That was a classroom para. I also think that some of the instruction that day, there was a lot of instruction, with a video camera in the room. But yeah, so that person, I should have said that up front too, that she is a paraprofessional for the class. But yeah, so, and I think to your point, that's absolutely, like, we shouldn't be able to tell and between, and how people are working that way. So thank you. It's a great question. And how it can be improved. That's the best part. Like, how can we improve what we're seeing?
When watching the video, I loved how they all had the same content. So he was doing the same exact thing as everybody else, and how his lab partner was helping him guide it, and not just the teachers helping him guide it. Like in your last session with Maggie's story, she kind of preferred her peers to the teachers. So when he was shooing her away, he didn't shoo his peer away, just the adult.
Right.
And also I love how they had the red folder where he could move, instead of writing down or typing in, he could move how many balls were moving with little dots, manipulative. So having that extra manipulative, but no one else really noticed that. It was just an extra support for him.
Right, thank you. And I will say a piece of context around that is that for him, the special ed and gen ed teacher, which I'm kind of giving away some of the questions around, do you see collaboration? Can you see that happened? And that's one of the perfect examples about that, I think. The materials that were there that were specific to him being able to communicate about the actual content in a way that worked for him, because that special ed teacher knew him to be able to know what to put in that spot. And that's the part, it's just getting into those habits of like having conversations so that we can do that for one another, right? And For him, the other piece that I think that you mentioned, so there were worksheets for people, there were devices for people, he had this folder that he had that was separate. Did anybody else see, what other ways of communication did he have? Other than shooing, he had sign language, he was verbal, he used his words. What else? A tablet too, yep, he had an AAC device. Other things that you saw. Did anyone see the little, board maker, I think is what the little pieces of paper that were on his desk? So if you watch the video again, if you didn't see it, but if you look, he has little pieces of paper in addition to that on his desk that are bigger, smaller, taller, shorter, all of those parts that are like the language and vocabulary that a lot of times we'll hear, oh, they need to know these things. How are they going to be in a classroom when they really need to know bigger, smaller? Like, how does this work? So having those things there for him, and so those would be, questions or follow-up or things that they could emphasize, to have that layer of, how does he engage in a real way with his peers? Like his peers could ask him those questions of, is this bigger or smaller? And he can use that, right? And he had a laptop just like everybody else. So I think you can see that gets at his communication and his engagement in the class. I saw your hand. Well, sorry, Jeff.
My question is your 5, 15, 45 model. Those accommodations took somebody an hour for one science lesson.
That was part of that. Thank you for that, because that was the second half of what I meant to say about his Velcro things. Part of the team decision as well was that for this entire unit around Newton's Law, where everybody else would be doing a number of things, he was focusing on those materials that were made, right? So it wasn't like every day he had a new folder. But it's that type of thing, of creating things once. There are also a lot of ways of creating things across classrooms that, like, teams are using digital repositories or using Padlets and things in a creative way to do the thinking once, the work once, and keep it, so that you can adapt it. Yep. I could...
So in our situation, it seems like a pretty good percentage of the children that come to us on the spectrum also have seizure issues, so we're not allowed to use digital devices with them as accommodations. So that adds an extra layer of difficulty when we're trying to do accommodations.
Yeah, those are all really good things that, so my question then would be, what would you do in a self-contained class? Because you would still be instructing, right? And hopefully the grade level content and things like that would be the center of the instruction. So either way, we got to do it. It's just, how do we do it? And how do we do that in combination with the background and expertise that we have? Gen ed teacher telling us what it is that they're going to be covering in the class. Special ed teacher coming in with ideas around accommodations and how to do that and how to implement it, as well as like related service and EL and all of that. But thank you. Yeah.
When you are speaking of a digital repository, is this something that's building-based, district-based, something on your site that teachers, when they're teaching a particular standard, can look for?
Sorry. I wanted to make sure that I was going through. Okay. What I was referring to was a team that had done it, but there are schools that are doing it. There are districts that are doing it. And so that's the thing, is that part of the discussion is as you're moving your system forward or creating these systems. It might be that it's just one or two teachers collaborating and doing it together. I think that it makes a lot of sense to do it building-wide, if you can, at least. But there are districts that are working on repositories district-wide, so that there's a way to access those materials across the district. Yeah. So just to kind of think about one example around, taking the standard, breaking it down. How is it that you're going to teach this standard for someone who has more extensive needs, right? So this is a second grade standard. Maybe it's pairing objects. Sum of two equal addends is an even number, right? So that's the main idea. Again, like what's the big idea? What are the instructional strategies? So I'm going to quickly go through these, but determine whether in a group of objects is odd or even. That's the second grade standard. What are we going to do for this person, right? And this gets at that question too of like, that's a whole hour of work to do, that's a real thing. So coming together and thinking about it. The alternate academic achievement standard is equally distribute even numbers of objects between two groups, okay? So keeping in mind those as well if it's needed. So the instructional strategies that this team came up with was using models to identify even or odd. Now this would be something that could be working for all kids, right? So again, like how are we going to get all kids? So for some it might look one way. The broken calculator activity was a piece of this as well. So with a partner that students would be investigating this. So again, you saw the partner work, the peer work, and how that can work. So this one is an example with Rose, she's very active and very social second grader who has autism as an attribute. On this team is a special ed teacher, a general ed teacher, speech and language pathologist, and an occupational therapist. So again, like that 5-15-45 protocol was what they used as a framework to come up with this lesson for her. One of the barriers that they identified was the access to mathematical concepts, representations, and language, and access to peer cues and communication. And how can we remove these barriers? So if you think about those two, what she comes to this, what needs she's got, right? What they thought of as removing barriers was to offer multiple ways for students to perceive the information, alternatives to auditory and visual information, familiar manipulatives for her, tactile, scaffolding expectations, and a focus on 1 through 6. So you can see how they've tailored what the general standard is, big ideas, barriers she's got, and instructional strategies for her, right? Access to peer cues and peers communication, offering flexibility in the social demands. Maybe she has a smaller group. Maybe she's with a group preferred peer. Maybe she has a key vocabulary list that is, the speech and language pathologist is weighing in on what that should be. So it's that collaboration piece and making sure that it's braided, right? Like our expertise is braided and coming together, and it doesn't have to be that big of a thing, right? This was one of the things they used for tactile, and because of low vision and needing to have the tactile piece and the ability to have different colors. So we're talking about 9 is odd here. We're talking about 6 is even here, right? Any questions? And I hesitate to ask that because I do want to go to the next part so that you can actually take a look. But I'm trying to just kind of put the process of main idea, barriers, strategies, how do we extend that to all? Are we good to move? Okay. We have a resource. I did put it in the list. We're not going to go deep into this today because it's one that I want you to take time, but I encourage you to look at. This also was designed with CAST. These are our instructional big ideas, inclusive big ideas. And it was developed with reading and literacy standards. And you can go in, you can pick the grade level, you can pick what type of standard it is, and it spits out ideas for you like crazy. There's so much there, right? And it does just what we're talking about. Big idea, barriers to learning, barriers to instruction, and ideas for it. And it has K through 8 right now, and it's only reading and literacy right now, but that's because we were focused on K through 8 with our funding for the last go-around, so that's where you'll find K through 8. But a lot of them, and just the way of thinking about it, can be expanded to other, and just the ideas as well around how to do it is really important, I think. So again, what are the students learning? What's everyone learning? What do we want this person? How could I teach this? These are the sections within the IBIs. It has all sorts of ideas in there. And then don't stop there. Remember to think about everybody in the class and how can we do that universal design. And so each and every one of them, it just breaks down all of the standards. So please take a look at that. Also within your resource list, because today I want to make sure that you have things to look at that will expand this. We have a 3rd grade example that is doing exactly what we're talking about, all the way up to progress notes and data sheets in an inclusive setting, a deep dive into it. There's a 7-minute video around it that I've put the link in your resource page. Likewise, in your resource page is this young man who is the one that I said, would be the asterisk next to his name perhaps, of how on earth do you do this with someone who has really, really extensive needs. That's a 10-minute video around how to use standards-based instruction, access to peers in grade level content and engagement with peers, using graphic organizers, using evidence-based practices, and using eye gaze technology. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And so again, it's within his gen ed class. They're talking about the water cycle, and it's all sorts of different ideas using those pieces that I just mentioned. So please check that out. But now I want you guys to have a chance to think about the 5, 15, 45, and we're going to do the 15-minute protocol. How am I doing on time? Okay, perfect. It's 9:22 where I'm from. Okay, so we are going to go into breakout groups because you've heard enough from me for now. I want you to kind of think together about how this might look with the kids that you have in mind and that you can share. And I know that people are probably here from different places, but when you get into your groups, if you could kind of come to an agreement of someone that you might think through together, I have one that I really want to think about, how could this look, and use this time. So I want you to try the 15-minute protocol together with the student in mind and just get as far as you can. I'm going to give you maybe 20 minutes instead of 15 so that you can get in your group and kind of identify a person that you want to think about together. But I want you to also put your ideas into this Padlet while you're doing it. So that could be like using the protocol and then just doing a screenshot of it or something and entering it in. But think about a recent gen ed lesson taught in an inclusive classroom, or think about one that you've seen recently or could share. And then go through the 15-minute protocol and get as far as you can. And then put something into Padlet, whether it's just notes. A lot of people find it really easy just to take a screenshot of the actual organizer. You'll get it once you're into it. So I'm going to give you 20 minutes. Let's break into groups of 4 or 5 to do this work together, please. Hopefully you were able to dig into it a little bit. Are there any questions? Are there thoughts you want to share? Is this like something you're going to take back and use tomorrow? Is it something that you think wasn't worth an hour of your time? Just kidding. Don't tell me that. What do you think? Any thoughts? Any key takeaways? Any questions? No one? One?
I was just saying, giving yourself grace. You have to start somewhere, and like kind of what you said with the videos and the questions that were being asked. So you start the work, and you identify those areas where you're getting stronger, and then you keep improving from there.
Thank you. Yeah, we often say that it's, we're all in the same room, we're not in the same place with this work, and that no matter what door, I envision like a round room with lots and lots of doors. And when you come in, that everybody is, we can open a door, we can each open a different door, but end up in the same place eventually. So yeah, start where you are. And hopefully this tool will help with that. Just the intentionality that's there.
Yeah, we just talked a little bit like, if you're working in an imperfect system, school system, which most of us are, and if what you have is 15 minutes, right? Obviously, we want to do everything. We want to do more than we can, but it's 15 minutes. And so if that's what you're working with, then the idea of setting manageable work, one barrier, one response to the barrier, we were able to do that in less than 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it matters, right? The time constraint matters. And so what you do with that time, as opposed to letting your conversation get away from you, and then ending up with no real resolution or plan, is helpful.
Thank you. Okay. Be sure to check out the instructional strategies that are a part of that tool, where it literally, it'll have more information and ideas than you'll ever necessarily want. But there's a great rabbit hole right there to really bolster all these ideas. And I thank you for being here today. Hopefully I will see you again in the next 3 sessions. Come see me. But thank you very much, and best of luck for everybody.
And Jennifer, thank you, and thank you for some tools that we can take from this session and begin to use immediately. And that 5-15-45 tool, I think you're going to find so much benefit from that tool. So thank you for being with us.